it's really important that everything we do in making mead or alcohol, for that matter, of any kind, is that we practice cleanliness and sanitation in anything that touches the product anywhere along the line. We don't use any heat in the mead making process, so it's super critical to us that we're clean and sanitizing everything. So even before I pull this nail in the barrel, I'm going to spray some 70% isopropyl alcohol on it to kill any potential wild yeast or bacteria or anything that could infect this product. And occasionally what happens when you pull a nail is this negative pressure is going to continually build up in the barrel, and so occasionally you have to vent the bung. So we have silicone bungs or wooden bungs in all of our barrels to keep anything out of the barrel that we don't want inside of it. And so if I have to ventilate that, I will be exposing the barrel, again, potentially to something in the air that we don't want to get inside. So we're just going to let this dry for a second. And as I'm looking at this barrel, I'm kind of a barrel geek, and I like to remind myself of, why is this important? And so what you can do when you look at a barrel is you can read it. There's information here that tells you really important stuff. Not only in our Liquid Chronicle, that's our own way of keeping track of everything that's happening in all of these barrels, which corresponds, of course, to a spreadsheet that we've got on our computers. But I'm going to look at this barrel, and it's going to tell me that it was made by a cooperage. Coopers make things out of wood, like barrels and buckets. So it's made by Sori, and I know that this happened to be Appalachian oak, and we have a code here telling us that as well, from Pennsylvania. And so people think about the concept of terroir in winemaking, and the concept says that the actual acre of grapes, the soil, the weather conditions, everything that goes into producing that fruit can differ year to year. And some years it's good and some years it's bad. Well, we don't really think about terroir and the concept of oak, but all of the barrels that you see around me, including this one, is made from white oak, in this case American white oak, from Pennsylvania, and the soil and the weather and everything that happened in the life of this tree goes into telling us a little bit about what we can expect to get from this barrel. So we choose different barrels from different regions, different forests with different toast levels to give us different results in the product. And so the slower a tree grows, the tighter the grain is going to be. And so in Pennsylvania, it gets pretty cold with winters compared to, say, oak from Missouri that grows faster with wider grain. And so you can actually look and see that we're talking about 1 millimeter in some cases of width in the grain, which means that this barrel is going to impart its characteristics of flavor slower than it otherwise would if the grain was wider. And it's often said in the winemaking world that there's a certain elegance and delicateness that comes from tighter grain wood. So this is a pretty tight grain barrel from Pennsylvania, American white oak, and it's also unique because it was heavy toasted. So as the cooper is cooking the barrel, they're doing several things. And one of those that's really interesting is the lignin, the sort of the fibrosy material of wood that makes wood as we know it. It chemically changes to vanillin when it's heated. So when you're reading about, this Cabernet, or in our case, a mead, that is getting vanilla characteristics, but we never put vanilla beans in. It's chemically identical to the vanillin from a vanilla bean, but it's coming from the wood and the way that these guys toasted it. And so it's how they toast it, the method, the length, and the ultimate results. But the more you toast something, you actually get different flavors. So with heavy toasted oak, we're gonna expect to have flavors that are roasty, that may give us chocolate or even coffee flavors just from the wood. So let's see how this particular mead is holding up to this barrel aging. So this is the second barrel that Aphrodisia went into. So Aphrodisia is our red wine Pyment, and a Pyment is when you ferment wine grapes with honey. So there's no water. It's a very expensive product to make because of that. I mean, think about like a really nice cab, and then you're adding honey that costs even more than grapes into there. So we're gonna see how this tastes. So as I'm pulling the sample, I'm making sure this nail doesn't touch anything before we go back into the barrel. And if I happen to drop it, I've got spare nails that are conveniently sitting in isopropyl alcohol. All right, so we have a nice sample. So right away I notice a color change in this Aphrodisia compared to how it normally looks. It's darker. So that's coming from the heavy toast of the barrel, but also from hopefully very slow micro-oxidation over the years that this is going to take to become ready. So it's often nice to, before you taste something, to aerate it. So you'll see people that sell these devices you can pour your wine through, but really just kind of doing this in the glass for a few moments helps it open up and release the volatile aromatic compounds inside. Wow, that is looking like tawny port. And I can smell, it smells like Madeira. A little bit of chocolate in the nose. That is so roasty and toasty. So right now, this is semi-sweet for a mead. The alcohol content is fairly high on this. We have not tested this barrel, but I think it's probably 16 to 17% based on our preliminary testing before this went into barrels. There's coffee notes. I'm thinking about Ethiopian coffee often can have actual like blueberry flavor in the profile, and I'm getting a bit of that. Dark cherry, like super dark cherry, like chocolate covered dark cherries. And then there's oak, and it's really different than medium toast or light toast oak, which is super assertive and tannic. This is like roasty wood. Like I'm thinking, like it reminds me of like being around a campfire or a barbecue grill, like right when the coals are ready to throw the meat on. Wow, that with like a tomahawk ribeye, medium rare, you'd be in heaven. We don't barrel age all of our meads, but we barrel age a lot of meads. And this is probably the world's largest wood barrel aging program of any meadery. So wood does so many special things to a mead. I would say that it can make a mead better if the flavor profile that you start with before barrels is going to be complemented by the barrels that you choose to age it in. So in the case of something that's really bright, hoppy, and citrusy, if you put that into a barrel like this, it's like you would never want to put that into a heavy toast barrel. Maybe you would put it into something that was, you know, lighter toasted, or maybe like a white wine, like a sweeter white, like a Sauterne barrel would probably be good for something citrusy and hoppy, but the hops are going to fade. So you would probably want to, you know, dry hop that, you know, as soon as it comes out of the barrel before you would package it, if that's the flavor profile you're going for. But you're not going to find very many barrel-aged IPAs out there, right? So there's a reason why some meads don't go into barrels and why other ones do. One of my favorite products, it's called Lagermas de Oro, and it's an off-dry, almost bone-dry in some batches, Arizona mesquite honey mead. So it's a traditional mead, but we put it into freshly dumped bourbon barrels, and it absorbs the flavor of the bourbon from the staves of the wood for a minimum of 3 months, sometimes up to 12 for that product. But we've also taken a very specific barrel from Four Roses, where we've taken that sort of Lagermas concept and put it into a Four Roses barrel, and then took it out and then put it in another one. And we did that 4 times over 36 months to make a product called Black Rose. And that was just unbelievable. So we have found in our short time as a meadery that we can actually age things for 3 years plus. We are actually labeling today a blueberry mead that spent 38 months in a beer barrel. And the story was so cool because we exchanged barrels with different breweries. So 4 years ago, I made a blueberry oat wine braggot, which is either a beer with a lot of honey or a mead with grain in it. And in this case, the grain was oatmeal. We're not allowed to use cereal grains as a winery. So I went to a brewery to make that with our friends at McKellar San Diego. And we sent them some blueberry white barrels, which is a blueberry white chocolate mead that we make, that we have aging in a rack, about 2 racks behind me. And they put this beer in there for a while, and then they sent us the barrel back. And so we just pulled a blueberry mead out of that beer barrel that had been in there for 38 months. So that's the longest we've ever barrel aged something. And it drinks like a blueberry Madeira if there ever was such a thing. So it's truly a one-off product. So I would say that when you're critically evaluating the ingredients and the flavor profile that go into a mead, before it goes into barrels, you pair it with the right barrel, you can definitely elevate the complexity, the diversity of the flavor profile, and the overall experience. And that's one of the largest contributing factors to the price points and things that we and anyone else with a barrel aging program makes. Because when you have something sitting in a barrel for 3 years, you know, it's taken up some space for a lot of time, but I wouldn't have it any other way.